Hi, this is Bob Samuels, founder of TechConnectr. TechConnectr is a transparent marketplace and campaign management platform of best-of-breed business-to-business lead generation solutions. We've partnered with the B2B Marketing Exchange to bring you wisdom from leading account-based marketing thought leaders. To that end, I would like to introduce you to Gregg Medaglia, founder and Chief of Business Operations of B2Lead, a strong and unique B2B lead generation solution provider. Greg, it's a pleasure to speak with you. How are you today?
Good, Bob. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you. I'm looking forward to the B2BMX event next week.
Yeah, I think everybody's getting ready to head off to Scottsdale in February, which you don't have to do much arm twisting to get that done, I'm guessing.
People love it, especially all those folks back east in the snow and everything. So for us Californians, it's not so bad, but it'll be a good event.
Yeah, that's what I always tell people. If you want to impress them, have them come to California in February, because that's, wherever they are is usually worse weather than we're having. And we're having some pretty good weather right now. It's actually bad weather because we don't have enough snow to go skiing, but that's a whole other story.
Oh, quit whining. So it's I'm looking forward to seeing you guys at the event. I'm interested in hearing your take on ABM and what you're doing these days on it. If you can start with giving our audience a little bit of your background of B2B marketing and ABM and so forth, that'd be helpful.
Yeah, sure. B2Lead has been in business for about 10 years. We're located here in Menlo Park, California. We do top of funnel content syndication for B2B lead generation. So we see a lot, we work with a lot of agencies and publishers, et cetera, to help fulfill lead generation campaigns for them. So ABM is, certainly been impactful in the entire industry, been impactful in the way we go about doing our business. 2018, 2019 really took off. Seems like almost everything now is ABM and progressing into the future with that. So our customers are looking to help. Either they do the targeting or we help them do the targeting on who they're going after for their ABM campaigns, and then we actually fulfill the leads to the point of giving them back a lead, and that they then follow up on with whatever systems they have in place.
So ABM, are they looking for new prospects, or are they looking for land and expand sorts of developments?
Well, I think in our experience, we kind of sit at a crossroads for what is happening in the ABM world, at least from our perspective at top of funnel. We may be a little bit biased, I would guess, on more of the programmatic ABM campaigns, but in our kind of the arc of the evolution of it since 2018 is it's felt very much like it started out trying to add personalization to targeted demand gen campaigns. So it was targeted demand gen campaigns with a bit of an ABM twist, but it certainly evolved over that period of time. When you look at the data, 2019, everybody, when you look at some of the surveys out there, there's one like from ITSMA, that surveyed, I don't know, like 100 marketers or so, and they found that somewhere north of 50% of marketers had less than 1 year of ABM experience, and that's certainly been our experience with working with lots of different marketers. It's quite a range of experience and learning. I guess the learning curve has been what 2019 was about. But now it's kind of become mainstream. Everybody's using ABM. People are seeing results from it. I think, similar surveys are talking, most people, like 3/4 of the people are, seeing like 10% or greater returns, ROI, from their ABM campaigns in a normal campaign. So it's effective, and you would think that is the narrowing of the focus on the campaign that you're working on, and being more targeted helps that campaign be effective. But the flip side of that, and I guess we can talk about that more, is you're starting, well, not starting, but we see kind of this concept, I don't know, of maybe calling it like over narrowing of the funnel, like over targeting, or a real bias towards targeting at the expense of being able to get enough lead generation into the top of the funnel. So it's kind of a balance. And I've even actually directly talked to John Miller about this, the and or kind of issue with ABM. Do you do ABM and top of funnel, demand targeting kind of campaigns, or do you do one or the other? And so I think there has been in 2019 a fair amount of confusion or back and forth with that, I guess I would say, with it, that we see coming across our desk.
So tell me more about the narrow audience targeting, the both the benefits and the caveats, I guess.
Well, I think the benefits from ABM targeting are obvious. You're going to go deeper within companies, and you are providing content and other types of items. Like, within ABM, you can end up with everything from champagne bottles to trips to personal handwritten notes. That ends up being on the strategic side. But when you get to the programmatic top of funnel side, you know, let me, I guess, zoom out a little bit. If you look at kind of where programmatic is headed in 2019, I think it was used as top of funnel targeting to go after many new accounts, and it was used to develop new accounts with ABM strategies. But we saw in 2019 somewhere around a 30% increase in the use of ABM techniques to penetrate existing accounts. So it's this realization that, and this makes total sense in the ABM world, is that you want to land and expand into those accounts. That's what you want to have, is deep, meaningful relationships with your customers. So the use of, in a programmatic sense, to land and expand has been a trend, based on some of the data that I've seen out there, and even with their own customers. But a strange thing has happened with that as well. I think people can look at ABM as a narrowing of target focus on a persona. And what we're seeing is, especially in 2019, is this massive trend towards the narrowing of who you're targeting in an organization. And I really think that's at opposition to best practices. So we see an inverse correlation. Is the higher the title that a marketer is going after, the less likely they are to respond. So what we see is campaigns coming in getting VP, CEO, and that's all they're looking for, right? Number one, those are really hard to get a hold of for any marketer to have them interact with your content. But it's also kind of goes against this idea of the demand unit that was released last year by Sirius Decisions. They had their waterfall demand thing, and now they've come out with, I think, is a pretty spot on idea of this demand unit, where a demand unit is kind of this idea of a buying group, people that are involved in the purchase decision for business to business, usually around technology, obviously. So you have a buying group. These are people that can cross functions, and those cross functions end up having a kind of an interlocking need for a product, a solution. And when you take the people and the need and put that together, you end up with this concept of a demand unit. And a demand unit is really kind of what you're targeting, but a demand unit is not a person, right? There's different components of a demand unit. You have an economic buyer, technology buyers, financial buyers. It sounds a lot like strategic selling, old concept from 20 years ago, right? But it's still very valid. So on top of that, what I've seen in the data, I was looking at an IDG report that was about the influencer survey from 2019. Was they were surveying how many people are involved in large technology sales. So like, what is the group? What is the demand unit that is looking to evaluate products and services? So what they found was in 2017, the average number of people that were influencing purchase decisions was 16. And in 2019, that number had gone up to closer to 20. And it's becoming much more collaborative sales. So what you have in ABM is this narrowing of focus, this perceived narrowing of focus, which is exhibiting itself in a narrowing of titles, which I think is the wrong way to go. And that's one of the challenges we see or saw in 2019. I think marketers should be kind of looking at going lower in organizations, wider in organizations, targeting the message, but it's this kind of concept of the demand unit, and also the number of influencers in a purchase decision has gone up. So the staff level people that are involved in influencing and coaching your salespeople through the process are becoming almost afterthoughts in what we're seeing. But I still think those are really, really key influencers, and much more likely to get a hold of them, which is getting harder and harder to do, and get insight into what's going on in the organization. And that's really a fundamental component of ABM. So that would be something, you're quite well connected in the industry. It'd be interesting to kind of see what other people think about that particular idea.
Right. So it sounds like it's important to narrow the scope of the accounts, but keep the breadth of the contacts within the accounts pretty broader than just
the narrowing of the account focus and the personas is fundamental to ABM, but going deep into the organization seems to have gotten second billing in ABM, and I think that's such a fundamental. You just see the data. I mean, our own experience. Serious Decisions, the demand unit idea, IDG with their, influencer survey, that kind of thing. I think it feels to me like that's a part that's missing from ABM. Somehow it's made everything narrow, not just the, company targeting. It's made the title targeting and the people in the organization narrow as well, which I think is a fundamental mistake.
Okay.
That's one data point from me.
Yeah, but that's a good one.
I think it bears out.
I agree. So tell me about lead to account mapping.
Oh, geez. Okay. This is a big one. It's kind of a secret one in ABM, though. You don't hear a lot about it. But if you're really doing lead to account mapping, and it's another thing, we sit at the crossroads of seeing a lot of this stuff. We see many, many people struggling with this seemingly innocent little idea, which, for those of you not familiar with lead to account mapping, is that if you get a contact that comes in from a lead source, there, let's say very simply, if you were targeting IBM and somebody comes in with ibm.corp.com, you have to have that mapped, or your domain, will restrict it, right? If you're only going after ibm.com, even though that's a legitimate ibm.com, or an IBM employee who you'd be looking to go after, unless it's mapped in any automated system that you have, it oftentimes will cause problems. So there's a few problems that extend from this. Is one obvious one is that you're missing good leads that you may be delivering from a variety of sources, and unless your automated system allows that to happen, it will get bounced and look like it's not a targeted contact within one of the domains you're going after. So that's an issue. The other one is that if you don't have it done well and you still want to make sure you get that contact, now all of a sudden you have leads that are going through your lead flow process that are kind of gumming up the works, or taking, people out of their day-to-day and having to go fix it or fix it by hand, that type of thing. So there's, it's a seemingly simple little problem, but it it causes problems on, I would say, 40 to 50% of the campaigns that we're running, where we have legitimate leads for people that they don't meet their domain criteria, yet they're actually of those domains. So in it's like you're stopping the manufacturing line. You have leads flowing through, and then all of a sudden one doesn't fit quite right, and you got to stop everything, and then you have to get people involved with routing it, that kind of thing. I was at the Topo conference last year, and I can't remember the name of the company now. I apologize, but they had actually hired data people within their SDR, BDR system that were kind of the first line of people making sure they were going through by hand and making sure all the mappings were done right and the data was accurate, so that once they got into the SDR, BDR process, things moved very quickly. And the gentleman who was presenting at that event was, because that was one of the most important things we did to increase our sales and lead flow, was to get the data right when it was coming in. So this lead to account mapping, it's kind of this, not everybody is aware of it or run into it, but I see it as a big one, because again, looking out across all the companies we work with, we see a lot of them stumble on that one.
So yeah, it sounds like it's important to make sure you're getting all of the leads compiled as one effort on the account level, as opposed to individual standalone.
Yeah, there's plenty of stuff written about it out there. It's kind of a little hidden secret of ABM. I think Lean Data has a product available for that to help people, with doing lead to account mapping. And then they have, I think, a database of companies mapped, based on their email domains. And, then you have the whole thing. I'm sure there's stuff out there with Salesforce, et cetera, to be able to do that. But in Salesforce, they have a unique ID versus just an email address as a unique identifier. So I'm not sure how they implement that. But yeah, it's a little sneaky thing that's out there that's been a bit of a challenge.
All right, so that's the contact side. And then there's the content side. And you guys are really good at content hosting and tracking and so forth. What are you seeing, or what are you recommending as far as content mix?
Yeah, people are doing personalization out there to some degree on it. I think that this kind of to some degree goes hand in hand with targeting lower in the organization, going after staff, managers, that type of thing, where we try to promote, number one, for sure, having multiple pieces of content. Because if you're going after a broader swath of the organization, you want to have some content pieces that appeal to different levels in the organization. One of the things I really emphasize is that works really, really well at capturing people's attention is some item that is business related but individually useful. It's useful to them regardless of what particular company they're working for. You can certainly make it related to ABM or however you're targeting the persona, but it would be something like how to be the 5 things you need as an ABM professional to move your career forward, something like that.
As an individual, as opposed to necessarily for that.
Right, it's relevant for their business, but it's communicated to the individual, not just the topic. So you can personalize that way, right? In the title itself, I think most people think about personalization as regarding, hey Steve, you at IBM are, one of our favorite people. That's a way to personalize, and that's how ABM, I think, is, oftentimes viewed at personalizing. But what we see performing really well from a content perspective is things that are personally useful. The title is personally useful, like I kind of just described, but relevant to what they do. I think that's an interesting way to personalize stuff. Multiple pieces of content as well. On the Lead Story platform, we have the ability to deliver multiple pieces of content, so you can target something personally for them that gets people to open stuff. And then once they're in it, you can have more detailed or work them through allow them to move through a content flow that gives some insight into their buying intent, things that, you would do something more broad that's personally engaging to somebody. And then when we deliver the content, there's other pieces of presented with it that are, case studies, how-tos, pricing, 4-quadrant kind of thing where people are going to look a little bit more deeply at that. Then you can score that as a higher, lead in your system based on their interaction with the content.
It's a great concept.
Right. So if you think about going broader in the organization at the staff level, more interested in your content, they're also more likely to share it. That's kind of the origin story of B2Lead. When we first started working, we started noticing, we were just getting off the ground, starting in the garage kind of thing. And we sent out a campaign and we noticed that, 7 people within the organization had shared it. And we're like, well, there's something going on there. And followed up, and that actually kind of got us going as an organization with a large customer. So I know for sure it works, and that was staff people. That was absolutely staff level people, but they started sharing it, right? So if you make the content personally engaging and shareable, there's multiple pieces together. You're going after the staff. That's really where you can land and expand and get a better account picture. Right. So I think overall what I'm saying is that you have don't confuse ABM targeting with narrow targeting in an organization. You can narrow target what companies you want to go after, but once you're going after them, you want to, think broad. You want to think, up and down and across the organization, not just going after the CEO.
And I love your lead story platform, so you can actually see what they're reading, how much of it they read, and like you said, if they saved it, if they forwarded it, and so forth. And probably see, I would suspect you see the staff and the managers more engaged longer and so forth than the higher level folks.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, at the staff level, it's probably over twice as much respondents as at the C-suite level, right? So I don't remember the exact statistic off the top of my head, but much easier to get in and get those people working, and then spread through the organization that way. Yep. Especially getting people to start interacting with your content, you can start to see, where it's spreading as well, right? And then with the data, data the way it is nowadays, right? In LinkedIn and, all the tools out there, once you start to see some activity, there's tons of different ways to go out and target those folks to go up the chain yourself. But once you get that foothold, or, the old concept from the book Strategic Selling is you get a coach inside the organization. If your salespeople can get a coach inside the organization, somebody can help them navigate what's going on, and you're more likely to get that at a lower level, then, you can start to figure out who you need to go after, right?
Yep, exactly. So a champion.
A champion, yeah. Strategic Selling calls it a coach, whatever.
Someone on the inside helping you.
Yeah, I'm old enough to have, started out when there was strategic selling. That was the, the Miller Hyman, guys that wrote that book. So that's where I started out. So
yeah, good stuff. So what are some of the cool things you're seeing, and what are you projecting for next year or in 5 years from now? How are things evolving?
Well, I think 2019 was, I think this, ABM, people were getting ABM much, they're getting better at ABM. They're, half the people were starting out and getting used to it, and it's become pretty standard now. I think, and then people started playing with a lot of the tools that are out there to see what works, intent data, some techniques with technographic, firmographic information. There's, new AI tools that, are promoting doing, the next level of intent. So but I don't know the efficacy of these, right? I think people are still figuring out that. Then overlaying combination of ABM with display as well, right? Combined, and then the overwhelming use of LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn, it seems like that's been the real trend in 2019, and is just probably going to end up being overused in 2020. But I think as we go out towards the future, it seems it's getting harder and harder to get into people electronically, just using email. So the combination of a variety of mechanisms to get a hold of people, I think, may get a fair amount of traction in 2020, in hand with all the data technologies out there that ABM practitioners are looking to use. And I think, I expect by the end of 2020, we'll see a lot more discussion about what's really useful, and what's not useful in the targeting of the targeted account lists, right? It's because ABM ends up being all around this precision around targeted account lists, and give us your successful customers. We'll go out and map those using AI to what else would be out there that's similar, or we'll map this thing on what intent they were showing before they purchased, and then we'll look for that similar intent and target those domains for you. So those will go into your targeted account list. So the nature of ABM focuses around getting a really good target. I mean, you kind of live and die with how well your personas are. So I think there's going to be a ton of insight into that kind of thing, and that's, I think, where the movement's going to be going in 2020, is around data and all the data analytics to make precision targeting much better. Whether it works or not, remains to be seen. I think. I don't know if anybody's super confident in these new technologies working, but everybody's trying them. So it'd be interesting to see 2020 where that goes.
So are you seeing? Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No. Go ahead. Go ahead and ask.
I was gonna change the subject to privacy and GDPR, and then CCPA coming around the corner. Do you see any concerns with that? Again, looking at everybody has a hard time predicting how is it going to be in 2025, in 5 years from now. But how much of a factor is that?
Yeah, well, I think the big thing, it doesn't really directly affect what we're doing right now, but I think Google announced that they're removing, tracking cookies from Chrome, and going away from that. So I think that's really going to impact display quite a bit, which I think, if that's impacting display, that those resources are going to have to go somewhere. And that's partially how targeting is done now. That's a lot of how intent data is done. So I suspect it's going to, if I was making a prediction, I would think that issue with the targeting limitation, or the tracking limitation, is going to really emphasize targeting and data analytics. And that probably puts even more emphasis on that. I mean, if you think about it, everything as a marketer you got to do around ABM is get that target account list. Because if you miss on the target account list, then it's like spear phishing. They talk about with Engagio, right? Your spear completely missed, right? So that becomes more and more important. So I just kind of think there's going to be a lot of weight of data analytic tools, AI, intent, whatever else is the next thing to come out. Device tracking, I hear, is one of the things that, based on IP and other things, that is what people are working on. So I'm certainly not an expert on that, but it seems like a lot of resources are going to be around getting your TAL, your targeted account list, right, and then adding a lot of resources to that analytics.
Makes sense. Excellent, Greg. This is great. So any other words of wisdom before I let you go?
Go after staff. That's it. I think there's a lot of value in that, and have a good time in Scottsdale.
Oh yeah,
my words of wisdom to you.
That's a good one. It can be a great event. Greg, it's always a pleasure. I will post this. We'll get some links on the interview to point out some highlights, and if you've got some some blogs and articles to share, we'll add those as well.
Great. Bob,
It's always
fun as always being a minor media celebrity that you're turning me into. So
it's a pleasure. Good job, Greg.
all
We'll
right.
talk soon.
Thanks, Bob.
Take care.
Bye.
Cheers.